Hi, welcome to the Teachbox podcast. This is the Let's Learn series. Here, we'll explore the intersection of learning and technology, one conversation at a time. I'm Faith Mundia, and today's episode features a generated discussion based on my latest research article published on LinkedIn. This AI-driven conversation expands on key ideas from the article, offering insights into education and technology. You can read the full article on LinkedIn and follow me for in-depth discussions, which are weekly. I hope you find this episode insightful.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You've been sitting in some really interesting stuff about Edtech infrastructure and how to make online learning actually work. Like when you've got tons of people trying to learn online at the same time. You even sent in this article called Edtech Infrastructure as the foundation for scalable learning. It's got me thinking, like, can we really use AI to make lessons that are, like personalized for every student, even if there are thousands of them? And then there's the whole digital divide thing. How do we make sure that everyone has the tech they need to actually participate? It's a lot to unpack, so luckily we've got our expert here to help us break it all down.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area, and there's so much happening so fast.
So maybe we should start with the basics. What exactly are we talking about when we say Edtech infrastructure? I mean, it's got to be more than just having cool apps, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's really the whole digital foundation that makes online learning possible. Without it, you just can't have effective online learning at a large scale. I mean, think about it. Like if you're trying to teach 1 million people at once, you need a pretty solid system to handle all of that.
So it's kind of like the behind-the-scenes stuff that makes everything work.
Exactly. It's the infrastructure that allows all the cool apps and platforms to actually function and connect with each other.
Okay, so what are like the key elements of a strong EdTech infrastructure?
Well, you got to start with a really good learning management system, or LMS. That's kind of like the central hub for everything, organizing courses, tracking progress, and making sure teachers and students can connect.
Right. I mean, most of us have used an LMS at some point,
Right.
For school or work or whatever. But the article you sent actually talks about how AI can make LMS platforms even more powerful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The research by Henrietta from 2024 really digs into that. I mean, imagine an LMS that can actually personalize learning pathways based on, each student's individual data. That's a game changer.
So how does that actually work? I mean, is the AI really adapting to each student? Or is it more like, just sorting them into different groups based on their skill level?
It's kind of both. The AI can look at things like how quickly a student is grasping a concept, what kind of mistakes they're making, and even their engagement levels. And then it can adjust the pace of learning, recommend specific resources, or even suggest different learning activities.
So it's like having a personal tutor for every student.
In a way, yeah. It's getting closer to that. But, there are definitely still limitations. AI can't replace the human element entirely, especially when it comes to things like, mentorship and emotional support.
Okay, that makes sense. So AI can be a powerful tool,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to use it thoughtfully. What about all this talk about scaling education? I mean, can we really scale things up if not everyone has access to the technology in the first place?
You're hitting on a huge issue there. The digital divide is a massive challenge, and it's not going away anytime soon. Like Benoliel and Schechter's research from 2023 really highlights this. We can't just throw devices at the problem. We need to address the underlying issues like, affordable internet access, digital literacy skills, and even just having tech support available in underserved communities.
It's a pretty complex problem.
It is, but it's one we can't ignore if we're serious about making quality education accessible to everyone.
Okay, so let's say we can overcome the digital divide and everyone has the tech they need. How do we make sure that online learning is actually good? That it's not just a pale imitation of the real classroom experience.
That's where things like platform ecosystems and collaboration tools come in.
Yeah.
The days of just watching videos and taking quizzes are kind of fading away. The most innovative edtech platforms are building in things like discussion forums, peer review systems, and even virtual labs where students can do experiments together from anywhere in the world. It's about creating a real sense of community online.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about replicating the physical classroom. It's more about creating a whole new way of learning.
Exactly. And Yang's research from 2024 talks about how these types of platforms can lead to much deeper engagement and, a sense of shared purpose among students.
It's really interesting to think about the possibilities. I mean, online learning could actually become more interactive and engaging than traditional classrooms in some ways.
I think it has the potential to be. But it all comes down to how we design and use these tools.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the tech side of things.
Yeah.
What of the teachers? Where do they fit into this whole ed tech landscape?
Teachers are absolutely essential. I mean, you could have the most amazing ed tech in the world, but it's useless if teachers don't know how to use it effectively. We really need to invest in teacher training, not just on the technical stuff, but also on how to use these tools to create, truly engaging and personalized learning experiences.
So it's about empowering teachers, not replacing them.
Exactly. And the research from Ben Farah and his colleagues back in 2024 really dives into this. They talk about the importance of ongoing professional development mentoring programs and even creating communities where teachers can share best practices and support each other as they, navigate this new world of ed tech.
It seems like there's a common thread here. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about how we use it to empower both students and educators.
Technology can be an amazing tool for scaling education.
Yeah.
But it's the human connections, the passion for learning, and the dedication of educators that really bring it to life.
That's a great point. We can't lose sight of the human element, even in a world of, AI and virtual classroom.
Absolutely. And that's something we need to keep in mind as we move forward.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about AI, divide the role of teachers. It's a lot to think about. And I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive into some real-world examples of how EdTech is being used to scale learning in really cool and innovative ways. Okay, so we've talked about all the foundational stuff with EdTech infrastructure and those, big challenges, but now I'm really curious to hear about some real-world examples. Like, are there places where this is actually working? Can we actually personalize learning for thousands of students at once?
Yeah, definitely. We're already seeing some really exciting stuff happening. One of the most promising areas is using AI to create those personalized learning pathways. Like we were talking about before, like in that Henrietta research from 2024, remember how AI can analyze student data, figure out where they're excelling or struggling, and then can actually adapt the learning experience to fit their needs.
So it's not just about, giving everyone the same material and expecting them to all learn at the same pace.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
It's about meeting students where they are and helping them progress at their own speed.
Yeah.
Like, for example, let's say you have a student who's whizzing through math concepts, but they're having a tough time with reading comprehension. The AI can pick up on that and, recommend some extra reading resources, maybe adjust the difficulty level of their assignments, or even suggest some different learning strategies that might work better for them.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's almost like having a personalized tutor for every student, even in a huge online class.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close. But, there are still some things that AI just can't do. Like, it can't replace the human element entirely, especially when it comes to things like mentorship and emotional support. Those really human connections.
Right. It makes sense that there would be some limitations. But what about the idea that, using AI to personalize learning could actually limit student choice or creativity? Could it end up creating a sort of one-size-fits-all approach, even if it is personalized to some degree? That's a really good point. And it's something that educators and developers need to be really careful about. I mean, the goal isn't to create this rigid algorithm-driven learning experience. It's more about using AI as a tool to empower students to take ownership of their own learning. The best EdTech platforms are the ones that give students choices, different learning paths to choose from, different topics to explore, and even the ability to, create their own projects based on their interests.
So it's all about finding that balance between, guidance and freedom, which is something that good teachers have always done. But what about that social element of learning? Can online learning really replicate the energy and collaboration of a real classroom?
I mean, it's a challenge for sure, but EdTech is evolving to address that. Remember Yang's research on platform ecosystems? We're starting to see a shift away from those isolated online courses towards more dynamic platforms that are designed to foster, real collaboration and interaction. Think about things like virtual study groups, peer feedback systems, and even online simulations where students can work together to solve problems in real time.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about replicating the physical classroom online. It's about creating all these new and innovative ways for students to connect and learn from each other.
Exactly. And these collaborative tools can be super powerful, especially when you think about the global reach of online learning. Students can connect with peers from all over the world, share different perspectives, and learn from each other's experiences. That's a level of interaction that you just wouldn't get in a traditional classroom.
It's really starting to sound like online learning could be, more interactive and engaging than traditional classrooms in some ways.
Yeah.
But are there any actual examples of this working on a large scale? Like, can we really provide quality education to thousands of students using these methods?
Oh yeah, there are some really cool examples out there. One that comes to mind is the National Virtual Summer Program, or NSSI. They launched this back during the COVID pandemic, and it was huge. They used a combination of really robust technology, well-trained educators and engaging content to reach something like 12,000 low-income students all across the U.S.
12,000 students, that's
Yeah.
a lot. And they were all learning virtually.
Yep. And the results were really impressive. They were able to actually address learning loss and, provide students with a really rich and engaging learning experience. Even with all the limitations of the pandemic, it just goes to show you the power of EdTech when it's done, right? With a focus on both the technology and the human aspects of learning.
That's a really inspiring example. I mean, it sounds like the NSSI could be a model for other programs that are trying to, scale up online learning effectively. But I'm curious about the challenges they faced. What were some of the hurdles they had to overcome?
Well, one of the biggest ones was making sure that every student had access to the tech and internet they needed. That digital divide we were talking about, it's a real barrier for a lot of students, and it's something the NSSI had to deal with head on. So they ended up providing devices to students who needed them and working with different communities to try to improve internet access.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You can have the most amazing EdTech platform in the world, but it's not going to do any good if students can't even get online. What about other challenges, like making sure that the online learning experience was engaging and, actually effective?
Yeah, that was a big focus for the NSSI. They knew that just, putting lectures online wasn't going to cut it. They needed to create a learning environment that was, interactive, personalized, and relevant to students' lives. So they did things like virtual field trips, collaborative projects, and even some gamified learning activities.
So they really went above and beyond to make it engaging.
They did, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons they were so successful.
What about the teachers?
Yeah.
How do they adapt to teaching in this, new virtual environment?
Well, the NSSI invested a lot in teacher training and support. They knew that the teachers were the key to making this whole thing work. They provided professional development on how to use the technology effectively, how to design good online lessons, and how to create that sense of community in a virtual classroom.
So they really understood that, technology is only as good as the people who are using it?
Exactly. And I think that brings us back to something we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive. When it comes to EdTech, it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how we use it to empower both students and educators to create those really transformative learning experiences.
I love that. It's a good reminder that even in a world of, AI and virtual reality, the heart of education is still about human connection and curiosity and the joy of learning. But I have a feeling there's even more to uncover here. Like, what other challenges and opportunities are out there for EdTech? Let's take a quick pause to gather our thoughts, and when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into the future of education in this digital world. All right, so we've explored all this amazing potential with EdTech, and, we've seen some really inspiring examples like the NSSI, and we've talked about those challenges that still exist. But it really feels like we're right on the edge of something huge,
Yeah.
Like a major transformation in education. So where do we go from here? What's next?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've seen how EdTech can do so much, like, personalized learning, foster collaboration, expand access to education. But we're really just getting started. I think one of the most exciting areas is using these new technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality to create truly immersive learning experiences. Stuff that we couldn't even imagine before.
Oh, wow. Now you're talking. Like, imagine learning about history by actually, stepping into a virtual recreation of ancient Rome.
Yes.
Or studying biology by, dissecting a virtual frog. It would be amazing.
Exactly. We could create learning environments that are not just engaging, but incredibly effective. Like, imagine a medical student being able to practice a complex surgery in a virtual operating room. Or an engineering student designing a bridge using augmented reality tools. The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
It sounds like we're moving way beyond just replicating the traditional classroom online.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new world of learning possibilities.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that require a massive shift in how we think about education?
It would definitely, and that's where the real challenge comes in. It's not just about, developing the technology. It's about transforming the entire educational system. We need to rethink things like curriculum design, teacher training, assessment methods, and even the physical spaces where learning happens.
So it's not just about plugging new tech into the old system. It's more like reimagining education from the ground up.
Exactly. And that's going to take a lot of collaboration, between educators, technologists, policymakers, and even students themselves. We need to create a shared vision for the future of learning and then work together to actually make it happen.
That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
But it sounds incredibly exciting. I'm also thinking about those challenges we talked about, like the digital divide and making sure that everyone has access to these new technologies.
Right. We can't let all the excitement over these new gadgets make us forget about those really important issues like, equity and accessibility. As we develop these new technologies, we have to make sure that they're inclusive and accessible to everyone, no matter their background, their location, or their socioeconomic status.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Technology can either widen the gap in educational opportunity, or it can help bridge that gap. It all comes down to how we design and implement it.
And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to really think critically about the potential impact of EdTech and to advocate for policies and practices that promote equity and inclusivity.
I completely agree. We need to make sure that everyone benefits from these advancements, not just a select few.
Exactly. And that's where, all that research you've been sharing comes in. By understanding how EdTech infrastructure works, the challenges, the opportunities, and the potential pitfalls, we can all play a part in shaping the future of education.
This deep dive has been incredible.
Yeah.
We've gone from talking about the nuts and bolts of EdTech infrastructure to the amazing possibilities of virtual reality and like a complete reimagining of what education could be. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what's possible.
It's been great talking with you. It's always inspiring to see someone who's so engaged with the potential of EdTech.
And to everyone listening out there, we want to leave you with this thought. As we're standing here at the beginning of this educational revolution, what role are you going to play in shaping the future of learning? Will you be a curious explorer, a passionate advocate, or maybe even an innovative creator? Whatever you choose, remember that the future of education is in our hands. So keep diving deep, keep asking questions, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Thank you for tuning in to the Teachbox podcast. I hope this discussion was valuable to you. And if you'd like to learn more, you can read the full article on my LinkedIn page and follow me for more research-driven conversations. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next episode.